Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show for Let's Talk Arsenal, which is our kind of new. It feels very familiar, yet new in a way. It's our twice weekly show. It comes in two different formats, and it is at the same time every single week. So you can set your alarms, put it in your calendars, set your schedules all around the Gooner Talk, obviously. But every single Tuesday and Friday, we'll be having a Let's Talk Arsenal show, which is effectively a 45-minute to an hour long discussion show where I have a guest on a Tuesday. So on Tuesday, myself and the judges are going to be here to have a chat, probably most likely talking about whatever happens on Sunday. And then Friday's show, which is what this is going to be, is effectively a little bit like a Q&A with you guys in the chat box becoming a lot more to the forefront and organised a lot more with the channel and integrated into things. So, and it's been great because the last time that we did this the other day on Tuesday, I think it was as well. And it was brilliant. We had 200 people watching and just continuously throwing in comments, and there was honest discussion. There was debate, there was disagreements, there was things that I agreed with, there was things that I definitely didn't agree with, but it was great because we could get all of our voices heard and things out there. So welcome to Let's Talk Arsenal. I'm hopefully getting in the works of getting some sort of proper introduction video sorted like we've got for all the other shows on the channel. But this should be quite fun, and of course it's massively involving you guys in the chat box. Good morning, good evening, wherever you guys are. Time to get a Szoboszlai emoji. Yeah, it probably is. Give us the goss, says Ross. We're going to talk about that. Yes, there's a couple of things that we've got to talk about that has happened. We've got to talk about Szoboszlai liking an Instagram picture that Arsenal put up. We've got to talk about an angry, heated discussion between the Arsenal players at training today, between them and the coaches, and then just between the players. Really interesting insight from ESPN that we're going to talk about. And then we're going to open the floor up to you guys to see what you want to discuss, see what you want to talk about. So let's kick things off with Szoboszlai. Now, a lot of people tweeted me a picture yesterday at the Gooner Talk TV, at Tom Cantor Media, if you follow my personal account, of Dominik Szoboszlai liking Arsenal's victory picture on Instagram. Now, let's add some context to this, shall we? Szoboszlai plays for Red Bull Salzburg in Austria. Rapid Vienna are an Austrian team that are typically fighting with Salzburg, mostly pretty weakly, fighting Salzburg for the title. And obviously, Szoboszlai is not a fan of Rapid Vienna as their main title rivals for many seasons. And it is not surprising in any sense of the word for him to like a picture on Instagram. Now, I know that this is the 21st century. I know that this is the only way in which we can galvanise hope on social media about this player possibly coming to Arsenal. But what I would say is, chill your boots, calm down. This is not one of those scenarios for me. It does not change a thing. It doesn't change a thing. So don't get your hopes up on this one. So the talk in Twitter land now is Zidane making inquiries for Szoboszlai, and I don't blame the guy. Zidane going after Szoboszlai is not surprising at all. This kid is an unbelievable talent and will end up at a big club, whether he joins ourselves, Real Madrid, RB Leipzig. He'll end up somewhere afterwards as well. I'm assuming. I would be surprised to see him go to Real Madrid, because I just think he needs kind of that next step before going straight there. I think it would be a very much a kind of a Martin Odegaard type thing where he doesn't get the immediate minutes, would go off on loan. Is that really the best thing for him? No, I think he should move off to a club where he's going to be integrated. You look at what's happened with Erling Haaland, for instance, or Haaland, as you're meant to pronounce it, supposedly. So how Haaland has kind of changed and improved and developed and sustained his position as Dortmund's main number one striker at still 20 years of age goes to show what you need to do in that situation. You need to move up to the next stage in your career. I expect Haaland to move on eventually to a Real Madrid, to a Barcelona, to a Bayern Munich, to that next level, and get ultimately to that next place. I still think Manchester United were fools for not going in for him from Salzburg, because I just can't see Man United being a destination in which he would ever choose to go. and they would have got him for around 20 million quid, and they could have sold him for a massive profit a season later. And yet I've got people like Terry Flewers who tells me that it was a good decision not to go for this guy, which to me just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Szoboszlai likes Arsenal, yay, says Temiola. I hope he likes defending, says Nico. And just to add, Chemical X says he just started following some Arsenal players, though. Yeah, but they do this. Like, I want it to happen. I want him to sign. I'm so desperate for Szoboszlai to come to Arsenal. Don't get me wrong, but I just can't get excited around him following a certain group of people, liking some tweets, because this is the 21st century and you like things on social media. I like things on social media. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything more to it than just pressing a picture twice. Iron Cub says, hi Tom, I assume you saw the news about Zidane and Szoboszlai now. Yeah, I have seen it and we've just discussed it. And yeah, it's not surprising at all. It is not surprising that Real Madrid are interested in him at all. Whether it's the right move is the next question. Karthik says, Mikel talked about goals from midfield and they are going to look at January window. It's written in the stars. I mean, if Real Madrid come along, we have no chance. Like, we have absolutely no chance of competing with Real Madrid in this situation. The only hope that we do have is if somehow they get knocked into the Europa League and for some reason Zidane then gets sacked, which is a real possibility. Zidane could get sacked. Zidane gets zacked from Real Madrid. And that could change things. But ultimately, they are still Los Blancos. And they still do sign the best players on earth. And they have that constant pull of being arguably the most famous team of all time. So it would be extremely tough for us to try and compete with the Madrid capital club. Unath Naik says, Sob for 21 million is a no-brainer. Puts lots of competition for him. Real can't offer him first team football. Interestingly, I think they can. I think they can offer him first team football because if you look who's playing across their front line, if they want to play him in kind of an advanced wing position, he can play left, right, or as a number 10, and he gets in over Lucas Vazquez. He gets in, ironically, over Marco Asensio right now. He's competing with Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo, and in the middle, he's competing with Martin Odegaard, who has had some really good times at Real Sociedad, had some good times on loan in Holland as well, but since coming back has not been able... I still think he should have gone off to Real Sociedad for another season. But he's not really been able to show how good he is. And he's getting games as well. So I actually think he could start for Real Madrid right now, which is crazy. I just don't think it would be massively, massively regular. I think it would be rotation. I think it would be about the same amount of minutes as you see a lot of their attacking midfielders get, which is it's in rotation. They have a big squad. Ed says the only Szoboszlai question left is, does he get the top bunk or does Tom get it since he's his flat? He could stay here if he likes. I don't live in a flat, but he can stay in my house if he likes. It's his choice. Iron Cub says, feel like every big German outlet is saying he'll be going to Leipzig. Surprise, surprise. Sob wants minutes. Really? Really? Yeah, surprising, isn't it? Dan says, have you seen Arsenic's recent tweet? Bayern and Leipzig and Liverpool also. The more he does, and I expect him to go to somewhere really big now, like the more he does. Unfortunately, Arsenal missed the boat. Arsenal have done the exact same thing with Szoboszlai as they did with Naby Keita. And I know that Naby Keita has not really lit the world alight at Liverpool, but he is still a very, very good player. He's not really been able to play in his best kind of position regularly enough on Merseyside. But we were linked to Szoboszlai in 2019, and I did it was one of the first tactical breakdowns we ever did on the channel was on the Hungarian, and he still had the buyout clause at that point. He was 19, he was a year younger, but his record of goal scoring in the league was still strong at such a young age. And the thing is with Arsenal is that we are beginning to see that the players that we get linked to, you start seeing the increase in competition because they're not what's the right terminology? They're just not gung-ho enough yet. They're not committed and they're not desirable enough to go out and get these deals done. And that is frustrating. And I think ultimately, I think there was the money to go out and do that. In addition to Partey, we didn't have the money to do Aouar and Partey, but we could have got Szoboszlai and Partey. I know that he came out and said that he wanted to stay there for another year, but if you're in there and you activate the buyout clause, at least give him the option. At least give him and put him into that situation where he's got to make a choice to actually rejecting us. So I think that we may have just missed the boat, unfortunately. It's a big shame, really big shame. But, there's always hope. There's always hope. And that is ultimately what we will be looking towards. So, yeah, and I think that Aouar, the Aouar situation, I see a couple of you are talking about Aouar in the chat there. The thing with Aouar is that Juventus look more likely than ourselves now. They were in January with a very real offer, and if it wasn't for Bernardeschi rejecting a player plus cash deal to move to Lyon, it would have happened. He didn't move, and Juventus couldn't sanction the deal in January. I expect them to in the summer. I expect them to come back as soon as possible to go in for Aouar. They really like Aouar. Juventus are very interested in him, and again, it's another scenario with Arsenal. Juventus are a much bigger club than ourselves, historically and currently. And they have the pulling power. They have Ronaldo, which people might not want to admit it, but that is a pull for players. It really is. And they will use that. And they will use that to try and get Aouar. And ultimately, he has been reluctant in the way that he's spoken and the way that we've heard things from Aouar's camp about a move to Arsenal. Arsenal is not the same, does not have the same knock at the door that Raul Sanllehi obviously thought that we did. And that's why we need to go in earlier and sooner and before. And we need to be better at just finding these players. We need to be better at identifying these players because we're just doing it that little bit too late. There are good signs that we've done it with the likes of Gabriel Martinelli. We've done it with the likes of Gabriel himself, the centre-back, a little bit later than maybe the kind of the year before that you could have gone in, but then he wasn't anywhere near as known. He hadn't really had anywhere near as good of a season as he did at Lille last year. But it's all about Arsenal really pushing and trying to get in ahead of the queue and trying to get into that position where they can be a lot more lethal. Ronaldo is nothing when we have Mustafi, says Joe. Alex says, I can see some outgoings too. Let's not forget that free up the wage bill. True. And that's something that we could see happen. Now, this is the story that I want to talk about, which is an exclusive in ESPN. So check it out if you haven't already, but obviously I'm going to talk you through it now. But Arsenal's players exchange angry words with each other in a clear-the-air meeting after Mikel Arteta called the squad together to identify reasons behind their poor start to the season. Sources have told ESPN that Arteta assembled the entire first-team group on Tuesday in a bid to address a slumping form that has left them 14th in the league. Arteta sought to rally the players and invited a frank exchange of views while also informing them he is continuing to investigate the source of leaks that led to a training ground bust-up between Dani Ceballos and David Luiz becoming public, which a lot of people wanted to turn around and say that David Ornstein was a liar. But actually, Dani Ceballos was the liar, it turned out. Once this first meeting was concluded, the coaching staff left, but the players stayed behind to hold an impromptu second discussion by themselves, which has been described by multiple sources as stormy and intense. Sources claim this second conversation involved an angry but constructive dialogue with finger pointing and raised voices, but ended amicably with a firm desire to rally behind Arteta and improve their performances in the Premier League. Arsenal declined to comment when contacted by ESPN. So, what do we make about this? It's first of all, I'd really like to know who you think the mole is. Who is the leak? Who is this person that is leaking information? Because it's so funny, isn't it, that Ceballos tweets out, quoting David Ornstein, that it's fake when it's clearly not. It's not a story that you just make up. And no matter what people like to say about The Athletic, I believe The Athletic to be a reliable source of information. I don't think it's Ornstein being the mouthpiece of the club. He is not that. If he ever was, he is certainly not that now working for The Athletic. From hearing the words of James McNicholas, Gunnerblog, The Athletic is kind of, in a way, thought of as a little bit of a pest, a little bit annoying that it's so reliable and it gets out so much information. But their sources are so good, and their sources of information are so good that you can't really, and that's why I subscribe to it. It's why you should subscribe to it. I'm not paid to tell you that, but you should, because it's a really good source of information with some great writers. But who do you think? Who do you think? Daniel Roberts says Marcelo Bielsa is the mole. Hector Bellerin says Susan. The gerbil is the leak. It's Mike. Mike's leaking the information. Messer Ozil says Dario G. I saw another one. Just like Mikolek said, who's the mole, Tom? Cough. Messer, cough. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. It could. But the thing is that why would he want? I suppose it's a silly question to say why would Ozil want to, because he wants to get back into the team in January. If he starts like getting all this information out there, then it makes no sense. And what I'll say is that leaks are really common. Like coming from my personal perspective now of being someone who's run the channel for 3 to 4 years, 2016. So yeah, 4 years. Even I hear stuff. I'm not the type to go out and put it on social media, and we've kind of had these discussions before. And sometimes, if you're in the Discord server, sometimes I put a little bit of information, like on deadline day when I was like, we're kind of expecting more than just Thomas Partey, and we ended up making 2 more signings. One of them's going to be joining in January, and the other one, well, to be fair, we did make the 2 on the day, Joe Idaho and Nikolai Moller, and we are expecting Omar Rekic to join in January as well. But before that was anywhere, like I put it in the Discord server to tell the members that be a little bit excited. There could be a couple more on the way. I had no idea who the actual players were. I just heard that there was maybe a little bit more business than just Partey. But I'm not the type to go out into social media and go, this is what will happen. There's plenty of accounts that will do that for you. You need to go follow you know who to follow. You need to go follow the bell. Because it's clearly a reliable source of information. I'm very, very trusting the fact that he's got sources very, very close to Thomas Partey's camp that has led us to believe that he could be back for Sunday's game in the North London derby, which is great. And of course, calling that whole situation as well. So whatever you think about ITKs, some of them are genuine. And I was very resistant to them previously. I didn't quite like the idea. I think maybe there's a little bit of envy as well, not just for myself, for a lot of other people that would love to be in the know about certain things, would love to hear things. But actually, once you begin to get information and you hear it, and Judges, our good boy Judges, pops on the channel, you know, he hears a couple of things here and there as well, and sometimes he puts it out here on here too. So it's interesting to see how much we do end up understanding and learning. It is not uncommon for things to leak from the club. It's not uncommon for clubs' transfer plans to get leaked. Agents leak information all the time to try and get better deals for their clients, to try and get more clubs to compete. That is very much in my mind that Szoboszlai's agent has leaked the fact that these clubs are interested in him specifically, and that has led to a lot more teams getting interested in him. The fact that he's got this buyout clause, that would have been spread around by his agent to let people know, you want him, come get him. He'll want a big signing on fee, even though it's a buyout clause, and he'll want a good agent's fee because he's going to be one of the hottest prospects in January. So it is not uncommon for these to get out there whatsoever. Glenn Cook says, what if it's one of his coaching staff? Possibly so. It could be one of the coaching staff that's leaked this. It could be someone within the medical side of the club. It could be someone higher up. It could be someone completely that we would never expect. It could be Stan Kroenke dropping in on his helicopter and then leaking information. It could be Gunnosaurus, says Matt Gray. In which case would be fantastic. He's got a little of a bone to grind with Arsenal for making him redundant for a brief period. But genuinely, it could be anyone. But let's actually focus on the story itself. The fact that Arsenal have had this meeting between them is great. The fact that they've talked to each other and they are going at each other is great. Let me just throw up on the screen for you again. The fact that the players have had this meeting, the fact that Arteta's called them out, called the whole squad out, got them together to talk about it, and it's great that there was finger pointing. You cannot get through things. We can all go into this world of being happy clappy and wondering and hoping that things are going to get sorted out with a few handshakes, which you shouldn't be doing during COVID. It's just not realistic. These things, especially in a very hyper-competitive environment, you're just not going to see a harmonious resolution to things. So it's good to see that there has been a bit of a fracas. It's good to see that there's been a bit of arguments going on between the players, and it's good that some people are blaming others, because I'd quite like that to happen. Because then you actually get to see the character stand up. You get to see the people that have the front about them to move past that, to maybe own up and say, you know what, yeah, I've not been performing well enough. I've not been doing good enough so far. I need to turn things around. And if I don't turn things around, I'll expect to be sold. And that's completely normal in the world of football. If players don't cut it, they should be sold. Something that Arsenal have definitely needed to work on in a while is moving on their deadwood and moving on players that don't necessarily deserve to be here due to their quality or lack of. And they also need to be better at obviously signing players and finding and recruiting players in the first place. But based on what this is hopefully a good news. Unaf Naik says, hopefully there will be a positive reaction at Spurs after this. GD2KNW says, don't really mind these leaks. Least we got things to talk about. Alex says, I'm hopeful for future windows. We always are cautious about our transfer targets forwarding on to Raul Sanllehi. We're not looked at because of him. I mean, yeah, The thing is, some of them that are like that we should have gone for, but we didn't, and maybe led to Sven Mislintat's departure, could be down to Raul Sanllehi blocking those situations. But I think there is as many pros to Sven Mislintat as there was negatives. Like, there was a clear Dortmund theme, Mkhitaryan, Sokratis, Aubameyang, and that's worrying to me. That's not good. And I was listening to Gabriel Marcotti, I think it was, on the Galazzo podcast. It should. Fantastic for looking back in time about Italian football. And he was talking about how he thought that when managers come to a club and bring players from their previous clubs, it's a sign of weakness. And I think it's the same for a recruiter. It's if you've moved from Dortmund and your instinct is to go and sign the players that you are aware of already. Aubameyang, yeah, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? He's so good. If you can get him. But Sokratis and Mkhitaryan, it just didn't work out. Mavropanos was still a bit unsure about. So it probably wasn't the right move, and I think he made a few mistakes. But there is also the other side of it to say that he could have found some real gems and had done at Dortmund, and hopefully we can still achieve that with Edu and with the new structure that is being put in place and streamlined. Just don't really know. Juan Felipe Palacio Rivera says, Tom, who is our deadwood? Why don't we do the deadwood thing? Let's do the deadwood and go onto Arsenal's website and look at the squad. Matt Macey probably needs to move on at this point. There's a young guy coming through in the under-23s that I'm really excited about. That needs to be promoted to possibly be being third choice. And I don't mean by you take him out of the under-23s to sit on the bench or sit in the stands. Keep playing him in the under-23s, but if we need him, use him. Yeah? Promote him. I think that is ultimately what we need to do. Bellerin, Tierney, Saliba, no. Sokratis, see you later. Gabriel Holding, fine. Cedric, see you later. Mustafi, see you later. Chambers, fine. Marie, I'm so happy Marie's back. I don't know what it is. I'm so happy Marie is back and we can see a little bit more of him because we just haven't been treated to enough of him, for me, to be honest. David Luiz will be gone at the end of the season. Kolasinac, see you later. Saka, great. Ceballos, I can't see us signing him on a permanent. Mesut Ozil, see you later. Going at the end of the season. Ainsley, keep him. Always keep Ainsley around. Partey, great. El Neni, I'm happy with as a squad player. Willock, still failing to commit and, make me commit to saying that I think we should keep him, but I don't expect to get a big fee for him. So for the moment, probably best that we do hang on to him. Smith Rowe, great. Would love to see him flourish and get more minutes to the club. Xhaka, sell him in the summer as far as I'm concerned. Get a decent 20 million odd fee for him and use that to improve. And that's another space that Ainsley Maitland-Niles, our boy Mainsley, can obviously take in the midfield based on that performance. So Xhaka, I'm happy for him to move on. Forwards, Lacazette. Now, the Lacazette's an interesting one. Arguably, you should say that if we can get, say, 30 million for him, I'd bite your arm off. I don't know who's going to pay that for Lacazette, but I'd bite your arm off for if this second striker-esque role works out in the summer, maybe he's kind of earned that spot. I don't expect him to, but you know what? Willian, I mean, we just signed him, so he's not going to go anywhere. Aubameyang, I tell you what, if someone came in with like a 50 to 60 million pound bid in the summer for Aubameyang, I would be inclined to accept, but I don't think that would ever happen. I think we've got him into the end of his current contract that he's just signed. But if he was, I'm telling you, like, we got offered 50 to 60 million for a 30, going on 32-year-old. He's not 32 until he turns it, but going into his 32nd year, he's only going to decline. 50 to 60 million would be unreal business, in my opinion. Pepe, got a lot of faith in Pepe, praying to God that he makes it. Nelson has kind of showed me in the last few games that maybe he has got more of a future at the club, but he's still got a lot more to do to try and convince me. Nketiah. Now, Nketiah is an interesting one. If someone came in a lesser side, came with a decent bid, 10 to 20 million for Nketiah, maybe that's something you would have to think about seriously. Martinelli, fantastic. Keep the kid. Guys that are on loan. Mavropanos has returned to action for Stuttgart. Very interesting to see how he carries on for the rest of the season with them. He played in their 3-1 loss against Bayern Munich and did fairly well considering the opposition he was up against. So that's interesting. He's an option that could come back. And the fact that we're losing Socrates, Mustafi, David Luiz in the summer, and we look to be signing to replace one of them with a new centre-back, Mavropanos provides us an option. Someone that could be used next season to get more minutes in the Europa League or the Champions League, or if we're even in Europe next season, who knows? There's no guarantees of that. Lucas Torreira, I'm interested to see how he gets on this season. If he does really well for Atleti, maybe we've got a future for him in the midfield. If not, move him on, sell him, get a good fee, see you later. Guendouzi. He's a weird one. If he does well in Hertha, then maybe we can get a good fee. I just can't see him coming back after what has happened. Maybe they'll turn over a new leaf after a year. Maybe it'll change. Maybe he'll prove to Arteta that he's about it. But yeah, I can't see it, to be honest. So, who are you guys saying are the deadwood in the chat? Just like McCulloch says, Deadwood, we have a whole log cabin full of them, mate. Socrates, Mustafi, Cedric, Ozil, Kolasinac, El Neni. Ooh! El Neni! Oh, he's a good squad player, mate. I'd keep him, just to name a few. Maseko says, imagine if Guendouzi was in that discussion, everyone's mentality was rise tenfold. Yeah, I think that's going back to the arguments between the players if Guendouzi was involved. But yeah, 100%. Is it Oko Wonko? Is that the player? I completely, his name went completely out of my mind, but he's very, very highly rated. The goalkeeper. Iron Cub says Kolasinac might go in January. To be honest, he was close to leaving to Bayer Leverkusen in the summer. Anonymous T says, you rate Bellerin? I mean, it's not a case of rating Bellerin. It's just, of all the positions at Arsenal, right back is not a position that I'm looking at as a priority that we upgrade, to be honest. It's just not. Like, Arsenal need to improve the front line. They need to improve the midfield. They need to improve a right centre-back slot. They arguably need to improve a second goalkeeper. Runnison is not convincing me at all. Right back is nowhere near the head of where I would place my priorities for upgrades. If there was an upgrade available, I'm never going to turn that down. But all I'd say is that it's not a priority to me to replace. And I think he's actually someone that is massively, massively over-criticised by the fan base. Alex McCarthy says, clubs won't be interested in signing our players for money when they know they could get their man for free at the end of the season. All I would say is that Barcelona might be interested in Mustafi, which is hilarious, but it makes sense considering the fact that they have so many injuries. PK is out long term, and TT is coming back gradually, but has always had injury issues, and it keeps him out continuously. Clement Lenglet was taken off in their game against Osasuna, but it's not a serious injury. And then beyond that, it is just youngsters that are there at Barcelona. So if they want to get Mustafi, 6 months left on his contract, they could bring him in for a fairly cheap fee in January, which would be absolutely fine by me. Also, how funny was it that Mustafi became captain at the yesterday against Rapid Vienna? How funny was that? Unbelievable stuff. Rydog says, El Neni, Xhaka, Socrates, Ozil, I'd sell Laka because he's in the last year and he's too old. good point, the fact that he's in the last year of his contract. So if we can get him a good deal for that, 100% would take that all day long. Zed Tom says Lacazette either needs to sign a new contract extension this summer or be sold so that we can get something for him. I'm very, very, very much on the side of selling him, because you look at the contract situation with Aubameyang. If you give Lacazette a new contract, arguably you are going to be giving him more money than what he was on the previous contract, because typically contracts either remain the same or they go slightly up to make the player want to sign. If he's not going to be given more money in his last big contract, he might as well just run that contract down for his last year and then move somewhere else for free, for nothing, and get a big signing on fee. So if you want to get him to sign a new deal, thinking realistically, that is only going to happen if you give him a pay rise. Is it wise to give Lacazette a pay rise for, say, a 3 to 4 year deal, which would see his contract finish in 2024-25, meaning that he would be... It would be 32. Are you going to get the best years from Lacazette from now? I mean, Lacazette is 28 or 29 now? Lacazette, let me just check. Lacazette is 29. His birthday's in May. So in May, he turns 30. So in 2022, when his contract runs out, he will be 31 years old, I think. Don't like doing these ages, especially not as an Arsenal fan. But when his contract runs out in 2022, he'll be 31. If we give him a new deal when he's 30 for, say, 3 years, you get Lacazette 30, yeah, you know what I mean. So 30 to 33, 30 to 32 for 3 years or more money than he is now. Is that worth it? No, it's not worth it. So either sell him or you just have to let it run down. But there is no point in signing Lacazette up to a new contract. Absolutely no point. It makes no business sense. It makes no financial sense. It makes no team sense to do that. It just doesn't make any sense. Just Add Chemical X says, Tom, please, what's your opinion on Basuma? I bloody love him. My opinion is that you will have to wait, because there is going to be a tactical breakdown on Basuma coming very, very soon. So cool your horses. Don't you worry. There'll be a video on Basuma coming on the channel very, very soon. Balaji says, spot on, Tom. It's better to cash in at the end of the season and go for someone like Weghorst or Edouard. What I would say, Balaji, is, and I haven't watched a lot of Weghorst. I know that James Rowe, if you follow him on Twitter, has, and he's a big, big fan of him. We would love him to come to Arsenal. Is that he's a completely different style to what we've got, and arguably with the amount of crosses that we put into the box, is someone that we could use for that. We definitely need to add something different, something new, a plan B-esque striker, because since Olivier Giroud's left, we just have not had that dynamic in the squad. There's a lot of hope on the youngster Moller, the Swedish striker in the under-23s, but he's only 18 and he's going nowhere near the first team for a little bit. So call your jets on that, and I'd say that Arsenal is completely fair. Now when you look at like a striker that's 30 years old, that is the type of striker that you bring in on average wages. I'm talking between 50 to 80 grand a week at Arsenal. That's fairly average. That's the type of striker that I'm fine with doing a 3-year contract for a 30-year-old, because they're not a starter. You're not going to get any sell-on value from them because you're not intending to sell them. You have them for the period of time that they're at the club, and then you use them. Ardelix Milik, I mean, I know I've said his first name wrong. I'm going to check how to say that very quickly. Arkadiusz. How do you say it? Someone phonetically put it in the chat box for me. Milik, who's obviously leaving Napoli unless he signs a new deal at the end of the current season, would be available for free. I've got a YouTube video is playing in the background. Arkadeus, basically, says Iron Cub. Maybe that's right. Basically, I think it could be that. We don't know. So if Milik is someone that we could look at, I'm all for that again. I think that's a good option. The thing is with Arsenal is that we've lacked that option since Giroud's gone. United had it with Fellaini. Spurs had it with Llorente. Chelsea have had it now with Giroud. Previously, they had it with Higuain, Costa, arguably, but obviously more of a starter. Arkadouche, says Dan. Is it Arkadouche? That's great if it's Arkadouche. What a name. Love that. Wilson says, yo, Tom, Szoboszlai likes Arsenal. Are you serious? I mean, he did like their post, but we discussed that at the start of the show. So if you want to roll back, feel free to roll back. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we go in for Dybala on loan. He seems to be out of favour at Juve and he's having contract talk issues. The thing about Dybala is that I'm never really sure what Dybala's best position is. Is it as a striker? Is it as a 10? Is it as a second striker? Is it on the... Like, there is no one, I feel, that can... I'm not, and this isn't me judging people's like view of football. It's just how confusing of a case study Paulo Dybala is that I never know what his best position is. And I don't know where he would play if he was to come to Arsenal. No, he's a quality player, and I wish we'd have signed him from Palermo when the hype was real at that time. But I just don't know where we could fit him in. Where do we play him? Where do we get the best from him? And I'm just not sure. A says Buendia and Basuma will complete the midfield and would be 45 to 50 million. And you know what's really funny about you saying that is that a lot of people would have really turned their noses up at signings like that. But the thing is that Arsenal have failed time and time again with European or South American or that South American and European talent at times, that it's just, why not go out and sign someone from the English leagues that is established in their prime. I mean, how old is Basuma? I think he's 23, 24? Basuma, 24. And then you've got Buendia, who is 23. So you've signed two players there. You've signed Basuma, who's 24, and Buendia is 23. You sign them on a 4 to 5 year contract, so that leads them until they're in their prime. You probably get an extension during the prime years of their career. If you don't, you sell them for a really big fee. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that business at all. And yet I still reckon there'll be plenty of people turning their noses up at that type of deal when really it's something that Arsenal should look at pursuing. Basuma and Partey next to each other is a beast of a midfield. And the thing is, it's not only that, it's intelligent. It's an intelligent midfield because they can both pass the ball really well. They can progress the ball really well. But also, it is not something Arsenal have lacked physicality for so long. And they both provide that. So I'm really, really interested. Beast Titan says, Tom from Green Talk TV to replace Xhaka. Surely he got more than 90 minutes in those young players. Me, I should do it. I mean, I definitely have more than 90 minutes. But my knee is a problem. You speak to anyone around the podcast regular group, my knee is a problem. It's I've had ACL surgery on it. I've done both my ankle ligaments in both feet, ankles. Your ligaments are not in your feet, they're in your ankles. I should know. Snapped them both. So I'm a bit of an Aaron Ramsey. I'm a bit of a Jack Wilshere in terms of my injury record. Is not great. But yeah, I reckon I'll give a good 90 minutes. Not bad for the deep midfield. I played striker for most of my career. And in my final year, I was a right back. So you can see how my career went backwards very, very quickly. Rodok says, why not save the money and use Guendouzi over Basuma? Because I don't know what Guendouzi does. I just still really struggle to picture Guendouzi doing something effective in the team. He just kind of runs around for me. I might be completely wrong, but it just, for me, I don't quite know what he adds to the team. Doesn't have creativity for me. Doesn't have a goal-scoring threat from midfield. He's not greatly defensive. He's just a bit of a box-to-box that doesn't add a lot of the elements that a box-to-box I feel actually needs for me. That's just my opinion. Paul Gaia says, Dybala is a second striker, moves into the pockets and offers creativity as well as a set-piece threat. I would happily take him. And if that's the case, then maybe it's something that we could work with and use him as kind of that player in behind Aubameyang or in behind Balogun in the future. Who knows? But I just, if we could get him on loan with an option to buy, that's preferable. I hate doing loans with no kind of future planning. The Ceballos loan, yeah, it's good. We got him for 2 years on loan, both years. But we've got no protection at the end of that. You lose a player that ultimately could be really good for you, or if he has a stellar season, you sign him for a decent fee. It's like Cengiz Under moves from Roma to Leicester for a loan with an option of around 20 million quid. And that, if he does really well, is great. If he smashes the Premier League and he's still very young and looks to be like a 30 to 40 million pound player, Leicester have protected themselves by putting their option to buy on the deal. Arsenal doing loan deals with no options or no obligations. Obligations are a bit silly, but options to buy are certainly something that the club should be looking at using more in the transfer market, because Arsenal make so many mistakes in the transfer market. So many mistakes. That they should be looking to do that where possible. It's really difficult to get clubs to agree, because if you're the selling club, a loan and option to buy is like the worst case scenario. It is the worst case scenario. There is no winners of a selling club doing a loan with an option to buy. Let me paint a picture for you. You have a player that you're not necessarily using too much right now, and you think, right, he's surplus to requirements, we're willing to let him go on loan. Player goes on loan, and you agree to a 30 million option to buy. The player that you send on loan, who's, let's say for this case study, is a striker, scores 30 goals in his loan spell at that club. And he now looks to be well more than the £30 million. And actually what's happened is there are other teams interested in the signing. Good example, Luka Jovic, Benfica striker, went on loan to Frankfurt, had a smashing season for Frankfurt. Frankfurt made the deal permanent. Real Madrid came in and bought him for a massive fee. So it's silly. Like, it's a really silly thing for selling clubs to do. But if you need to get players off the wage bill and you're desperate, sometimes it happens. But it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it really, really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Balaji says, do Arsenal need another right-sided centre-back with Chambers and Holding, Saliba, Mavropanos already in their books? Balaji, hear me out on this one. With Mustafi, Socrates, David Luiz all going, there is a lot of pressure on Holding and Chambers, who have both had really big knee injuries. And let's face it, whilst I think have done pretty much nothing wrong, especially obviously we haven't really seen Chambers, but Holding's not really done too much wrong. But he's never really been more than a 7 out of 10 in each game. He's been decent, he's been okay, and that's fine. However, we could do with a better centre-back. And there is always scope to improve. Saliba is clearly not ready for us right now. He's going to go out on loan in January for 6 months. Great. I hope he does really well. And the thing is that if we sign someone good at right centre-back, then Saliba can come in and compete for that spot. You should not be in a scenario as a club where you sign a really good youngster who just walks into your team. That shouldn't be the situation if we're being really honest. You should be a club that signs young players for decent sized fees who then have to earn that place. That have to go into that team and try and get that place for themselves. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. I mean, you look at Barcelona signing Jean-Claire Todibo from Toulouse. Hasn't worked. Gone off to Benfica, isn't really playing at Benfica. You look at Barcelona signing a very young Rafa Varane or signing Eder Militao. Eder Militao doesn't really look like it's working, to be honest. I think he's absolute rubbish, to be honest, at this stage in his career. But he could come good. Who knows at this stage? But Varane obviously did work out, did do very, very, very well. So there's times when it works and there's times where it doesn't. But I don't think there's anything wrong with Arsenal investing if they have the money is the key thing. If signing a right centre-back impacts how good Arsenal can compete in other areas of the pitch which are higher priorities like creative midfield, then you need to prioritise that position. But if you've got the scope and the spending capabilities to be able to do both, then do both. There is absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. Daniel Robert says, with Vieira getting sacked from Nice, would you like to see him as part of Arteta's backroom staff? I mean, it's quite an oxymoronic question you've put in there, Dan. Guy's been sacked. Do I want him? No, not really. To be honest, I mean, is it bad for me to say that no, I don't really want a guy that's been sacked? A lot of people actually wanted Vieira to take over from Arsene Wenger. And it's clear to me now that failing in Nice, which was a club that would look to be on the rise, I thought, and I'm coming from a very outside Liga perspective that I'm not integrated into the league as much, but they looked like they were doing okay at times. They got back into Europe, but yeah, it just has not worked. So I'm going to hold back on that. I also think as a head coach of a club, if you take a step back to being someone's backroom staff, it's not the best. Gianfranco Zola for instance, as an example. Channel Wanderer says, find a good scout in France and fill all the weaknesses cheap. I mean, we do have scouts that work in that area, unless we've made them redundant. But we do. Rydog says, why is it clear Saliba isn't ready? It's not clear. It is clear for me. It's clear if you watch him in the under-23s. He stands out. He's good in terms of his dribbling, in terms of his defensive capabilities. But in terms of his passing, in terms of the way that he moves the ball, it's not yet ready for the first team. It's not yet ready for that. You look at the way that David Luiz moves the ball, it's miles above Saliba. And it's just this constant new toy syndrome is what I call it around the Arsenal fan base, is that we're so desperate to see guys that we sign play and to be better than what we've currently got. And the fact is that if you spent 27 million quid on William Saliba because he could be worth it in the future, and all of the evidence has told you that he could be worth it in the future, that's great. But if you throw in him too early, then you get a scenario where he's losing confidence, where he can't pick his form up, where he gets dropped for someone else who we never thought would be anywhere better. And the other route is obviously that he would do really well and succeed. But it's a risk. Why take that risk? Wait for him to bed in, wait for him to get the necessary experience, and then you move him in. It is important that you transition a solid investment like we have done in William Saliba correctly. And there is a reason why some people are not working in football clubs and why some people are. And that is as simple as that, to be honest. It's just you even know why and how things are going on, and clearly they're more in the know than we are about what's going on with William Saliba. We've talked about it, we've watched him, we've done tactical breakdowns on the performances. He's not ready yet. We can look back to the performances in France as a gauge and as a good barometer to say that should we have signed him or not, but it's a completely different kettle of fish. It's so different to the Premier League. So just be patient. Just be patient. Rydog, what I do agree with you is that not playing can't be good for his confidence. And I do agree with you there. And that's down to the club. And the club has to take full responsibility for not sorting a loan out this season. We should have sorted a loan out for the whole of this season. And if he had done really well on this loan spell, again, then you have scope to say, now maybe it's time to put him into that first team. Maybe it's time to integrate him. But at the moment, no. And especially considering what's happened to him now, Rydog, there is absolutely no chance that you put him into the first team squad with how his situation is and how his mood is, how his temperament is right now. It'd just be to start him would be silly. I'd like to see him in the squad so you can give him some minutes, but to start him, no. Rydog says Fofana waltzed straight into Leicester. Yeah, you'd walk straight into Leicester's team and the amount of injuries they had. With my one knee, I'd waltz into Leicester's defence with the amount of injuries. They have Wes Morgan, Soyuncu and Johnny Evans. Wes Morgan's 36. Soyuncu is out for pretty much the whole season. Johnny Evans is getting on a bit now. And they just spent 40 million quid on Fofana. Meanwhile, at Arsenal, you've got Gabriel, you've got Socrates, you've got Mustafi, you've got David Luiz. You can see where I'm going with this. You've got Holding, you've got Chambers coming back, you've got Pablo Mari coming back. Like, there is such a different scenario. And the thing is if you actually look at the performances of Fofana, blew onto the scene, great in his first display. And as that first display has happened, it has declined and it has slowly gone down and it has gone down and it has gone down. And it has dramatically decreased in effectiveness over the course. So what I would say is, Rydog, is go have a look at how he's performed. Go have a look at Leicester's defensive scenario and how they were literally forced into playing him because of the amount of injuries that they had. You cannot compare the two. It is as simple and as black and white as that. Bad Boy says, I've got a feeling that Arteta will sell him. We'll have to wait and see if he does sell him. If it's not more than what we paid for him, it's a joke. I mean, to sell him anyway, I think it's a bit of a joke, but that would be ridiculous. Fofana has not been great at all, says Daniel Robert. A says, is it time the fan base be open to smart signings rather than big signings? Yes. Fofana was poor against Fulham, says Balaji, as does Daniel Robert. Channel Wanderer says, Leicester and Wolves play Moneyball better than we do. Yeah, they do. And they're really good case studies to look at. They're really, really good case studies to look at in terms of clubs that we should be looking to model ourselves on. Now, I'm not saying that you look at Wolves and you turn around and you say, yeah, you know what we should do with Wolves? We should sign loads of Portuguese players. Now, that's not what I'm saying to do. What I'm saying that we need to look at is the way that they scout, is the way that they get players in that can communicate together. Like, they've got a really good team and a squad ethic because they got a Portuguese coach. They're signing Portuguese players that can communicate well with each other, that are good quality, that are young. They're not signing players that are really old, but they're signing players that are going to have a significant impact on the team. And if they are selling their players, they're selling the likes of Diogo Jota for 45 million quid. Or if you're Leicester, you're selling Harry Maguire for 80 million pounds. Give me a second. 80 million pounds is what you're selling Harry Maguire for. So you should be looking at them. And then you look at Soyuncu that came in to replace Maguire for I think it was about 15 odd million quid from Freiburg. And we were linked to him. And we were linked to Johnny Evans, and like you just laughed, didn't you? Because Arsenal's recruitment policy has been so bad for so long. And we do need to. You're completely right, Wanderer. We should be looking at the likes of Wolves and Leicester as an example to a rhetoric and to a process that we should be looking to try and use ourselves. Opinions on Akinola, says Dan Robert. I've not seen enough of him. Honestly, whenever I watch the under-23s, I pretty much spend the whole thing watching Saliba. But he looks okay. We signed him from Huddersfield, I believe it was, on a free in the summer. So he came in this year. He's kind of defensive-minded. So, but yeah, it's great to see these young guys doing well and playing in the under-23s at such a young age and having an impact. So keep your eyes peeled on Akinola and Dinze as well, who we signed from Spurs. We're going full Brazilian soon. Very sorry, says Tamo. And to be honest, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you've got, if you remember when we had like the German contingent, where we had like Per Mertesacker and Podolski and Ozil. There's nothing wrong with getting kind of little cliques into the team and having these little small communities of players that communicate, that get on with each other, that boost morale. And then you don't have scenarios where people are isolated and feeling like closed off, like Alexis Sanchez was, and that ultimately maybe was in part one of the reasons why he moved on, was because he was isolated, because of his mentality, was so much on a better level than everyone else's. And it's important that you find people that will click together. Like, do you remember when we on the channel when we did the Tactical Breakdown podcast with Drew, we had Oliver Zeziger on, who is a scout for a team in Switzerland. He's also the Switzerland head researcher for Football Manager. And we asked him about how you go about scouting things. He could only tell us so much because you want to keep as much of that secret. But you look at the player's behaviour. You look at his demeanour. You look at what he's like in training. You look at what he's like in pre-match, post-match, in interviews. Just his general personality and characteristics. You need to make sure you sign players that are not going to be a bad apple. And sometimes I think that we have failed to do that. We used to be a club where you would never think we'd go out and sign certain players that would ultimately have a bad impact on the dressing room. But we did go out and sign some players that were of that ilk. So it's going to be interesting to see how things change going forwards and if we do learn from our mistakes ultimately as well. Balaji's question says, opinions on Mainsley and Partey as a midfield pivot going forward. 100% behind that idea. If both are fit, play them. Mobility, key. So much quicker than what we've got already with Xhaka and El Neni and Sabah. So much faster. So much faster. So 100%. Go for those. P. Trim, Tom, Buendia is a good buy. He fits the bill probably better than Szoboszlai. Maybe in terms of transition, I agree that he's a good buy. I think that if we could get Szoboszlai, you do it. Like, it's just, he is going to be one of the best midfielders, fingers crossed, ever. So, who not ever? Maybe ever's a bit, I get carried away. Eager Arnold says, would you take Lamptey? I'm going to change that to say Lamptey or Aarons. I would take either of them as backups and as prospects to Hector Bellerin for sure. Give him better competition and sell Cedric. Sell him. Don't have need for him. I don't know why he's here. Actually, I do know why he's here, because Edu's best friends with Kia. But other than that, I don't know why he's here. I don't know why we actually went for him. Yes, Vance says, thoughts on Samore? His contract is expiring, I think. I know Raf's a big fan of him as well. There was Sangara as well, of course, I think went off to PSV. Two very similar players in Liga. But yeah, Samora at Lille, good at progressing the ball forwards. What I would say is I just think he's a bit of a... Now, this is not meant to come across as offensive to him, but he is a bit of a B-Tech Partey. Like, he's a lot... I know that's describing him very, very poorly, but Partey is better in every single sense. And I think we kind of have that player in Partey. I don't think he's someone that I would necessarily partner Partey with. I think he's someone that you would have of instead of Partey, and I don't think he's good enough to do that. I think an Ainsley Maitland-Niles type next to Partey really works. Or an Aouar slightly ahead with maybe a Szoboszlai next to him. So it's interesting. It's interesting. No, Kia, not you, mate. Kia. Kia Jarabchin, the big agent. David Samuel says, Tom, it's funny how these great players at Arsenal have somewhat failed as managers. Henry, Vieira, Adams. I hope Arteta bucks the trend. I think there's an element of it is that young coaches in general, like in the Premier League, you look at young coaches, you've got Arteta. Eddie Howe ultimately didn't do that great at Bournemouth in the end. They got relegated and he was always kind of looked at as the prodigal son. Didn't do that well. Frank Lampard has gone out and done well in his first season to get them Champions League football. And then he spent a lot of money. And if things don't go too well... And there was things like the start of the season, I remember people saying he was under pressure. So there are some interesting young coaches about. Julian Nagelsmann, of course, as well. Jesse Marsh, I believe, is in his 40s. So there are a lot of young coaches about. But I don't think the coaches that are coming through are necessarily as good as the generation that were before them. Yeah, I'm just not sure. To be honest. So it'll be interesting. Gerrard's at Rangers is doing quite well, says Iron Cup. But I'd say that if you look at things on the whole, I think the generation before this current crop of young coaches coming through is better. Obviously, they need to obviously show that a lot more, and they haven't had that opportunity to really. But I don't necessarily think it's just down to them being ex-Arsenal players, to be honest, because I think there are... Sometimes it just doesn't work with players going into coaching in the way that we have seen recently. Certainly in the way that we've seen it over the past 40 years they have. The likes of Ancelotti, Mancini. Italians usually doing quite well. But other than that, it's usually the players, ironically, that you look at Wenger, didn't really have that much of a playing career. Mourinho didn't really have much of a playing career. And it's and then you get the likes of Pep Guardiola that had an amazing playing career. So I think it's more down to the latest generation. It's going to be interesting. They're being given big jobs very quickly. Arteta at Arsenal, Lampard at Chelsea, Pirlo at Juventus, Nagelsmann at Leipzig. They're being given... I don't know, how old is Hansi Flick, actually? I don't know how old Hansi Flick... I imagine he's near 50, if not... he's 55. So he's not what I'd describe as a young coach, but he's a relatively new coach, Hansi Flick. Like, he managed... Yeah, before Bayern Munich, he was the assistant there. He was assistant to Jürgen Löw, I believe, in the Germany. He was at Red Bull Salzburg as an assistant, but I didn't know that. See, that's something I didn't know. In 2006, he was manager of Hoffenheim between 2000 and 2005. Again, I didn't know that. So he's had a really odd one, a really, really odd career as a manager. So, and I don't know how successful he was as a player. As a player, he played for Bayern Munich. I don't know much about Hansi Flick at all as a player, but he played 104 games for Bayern Munich in a very, very short career. He only played 144 games, according to this, across his entire career, which is very short. So, yeah, it's interesting. There are some really interesting coaches, and there are some coaches that I think that are just not quite going to make it. Marco Rosa's a good shout, actually. You, of course, used to be Red Bull Salzburg's coach as well. Rose is spelt like Rose, right? You pronounce it Rosa, but it's spelt like Rose. Yeah, I thought he was younger than 55 as well. So that really, really did surprise me to know that he's 55. That's mad. Rahil says he is there as a backup and he is a decent backup. People like getting on the bandwagon. The Cedric hate is real. I don't necessarily hate towards him. I just don't look at him as someone that has added anything besides a block to Jordan Osei-Tutu or as Maitland-Niles is getting more minutes at right back. I don't see him as anything more than as a wall in the way of certain routes of players is what I would say around that. Toby says thoughts on Sekou Koita at Salzburg. Great young player, as is Berisha, as is Adeyemi. I could go through, I should do a whole show talking about Red Bull Salzburg, really, shouldn't I? I'd be here for another hour, and we've done our hour today. Thoughts on Camavinga as a potential... Toby, you are dreaming if you think Camavinga's coming to Arsenal. Dreaming. He is the best young player in the world right now. He is unbelievably good. Unbelievably good. Real Madrid will snap him up all day long. All day long. So, there you go. Let's talk Arsenal. Our first real show on a Friday. This will be the norm every Friday, 5 o'clock UK time. So, set your schedules, set your alarms as we go through all of your comments on a Friday. It is also back on a Tuesday, 5 o'clock, where I'm joined by a guest every single week. On Tuesday, I'll be joined by Lee Judges to talk about plenty of Arsenal stuff. Tomorrow is the preview for the Arsenal North London derby away at Spurs. I'll be joined by Joe Aldrig, producer at TalkSport, who is a massive Spurs fan, but he's a nice guy. So make him welcome. Be nice as much as you can, but we'll be there to talk about the North London derby and get his thoughts ahead of what is a pivotal clash for both clubs as they pursue very different objectives early on in the season. And then on Sunday, we'll be back straight after the game for the Raw Reaction Show, so make sure you join us and turn those notifications on to join us in the chat box as we react angrily, funnily, and hopefully joyfully after the game. We'll wait and see. Monday, of course, is the podcast. I'll be joined by Drew French and Johnny Cochran after the game as well. And that rounds us back round to Tuesday. As I've mentioned already, we'll be joined by Lee Judges for Let's Talk Arsenal. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you on the show as always. Make sure you drop the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and join up as a member. Thank you, of course, to all of our members for the continued support and to everyone in the Discord server. Our Discord server seems to be popping off every single day. It's like Let's Talk Arsenal, but 24/7 in text form, and it's just conversations. We jump in there, we have conversations, we have chats. We have game time shows, we have pre-game shows, transfer shows, where I drop little tidbits of information whenever I get it, which is sparsely. But yeah, it's a good time in the Discord. So make sure you become a expert member and join the Discord server. So thank you ever so much, people, for tuning in. I will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.